Sony CEO Howard Stringer facing harsh criticism after his company revealed hackers may have stolen the data of another 25 million accounts in a second security breach. Sony is down 20% this year as it struggles to match recent hits from rivals like Nintendo, Samsung, and Apple. Right now, it is currently trading lower on the day by a full percentage point. John Fort has more on the story from San Jose. John.
Melissa, that's right. More bad news for Sony as the company announced last night that hackers may have accessed 25 million more user accounts, as you said, that those allow PlayStation 3 owners to play games against each other over the internet. Now, taken with another breach the company disclosed 2 weeks ago, this brings the total number of potentially compromised accounts to about 77 million. So how does this rank in the history of big data breaches? In terms of the raw number of people affected, pretty high. The title for biggest breach on record goes to Heartland Payment Systems in January 2009, in which 100 million accounts were affected. The big difference here, though, is that in the Heartland case, that was up to 100 million credit cards. In the Sony case, only a tiny fraction of the hacked accounts appear to have contained credit card information or bank information. So what was lost? Sony says names, addresses, emails, birthdays, more information like that. In about 25,000 overseas accounts, bank account and credit card numbers were hacked. Now, security experts I've spoken with say that while the direct risk of financial loss here isn't as great as some other breaches, the kind of personal information that hackers accessed could put other types of accounts at risk. That's to say nothing of the damage to Sony's reputation. In a year when Microsoft's Xbox 360 is enjoying a second wind thanks to its Kinect motion sensing accessory, and Nintendo is poised to show off the follow-on to its Wii console next month, Sony doesn't need the distractions and harm to its brand. Back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, John. Let's talk more about Sony's security breach and what does it mean for shareholders and for Sony CEO Howard Stringer. How will the breach impact Sony rivals? Joining us now is Dan Ernst, principal at Hudson Square Research. Also, Dave Eitel, president and CEO of Immunity, Inc. He has worked for the National Security Agency and is ranked a top ethical hacker in the U.S. I don't know what that is. I'm going to ask. An ethical hacker. All right. We've got our own Herb Greenberg here. Dave, what's an ethical hacker? And even more importantly, has Sony really screwed up here, or could this happen to anyone?
An ethical hacker is a hacker who gets on TV.
Okay.
You're going to learn.
Okay.
So
I have even more questions about that, but I'm going to let that one go. Did Sony really screw up here, or could this have happened to anyone?
this will and has happened to everyone, and you've seen it, in the financial sector with the Aurora attacks, and you've seen it pretty much everywhere. But yes, they screwed up. They screwed up bad, and what they did was they didn't invest in security over the last decade. And now they're paying the price.
Dan, this is the second time around for Sony, and I'm told by people that know about this stuff, when it comes to customer records and credit card numbers, there's a lot better technology on the market than Sony is utilizing. Is that true?
Of course. I think, as the other guest has said, that perhaps they underinvested in security. But I'll go back to what John said in the pre-roll there, that this is a universal problem. Right, the Heartland security case just last month, J.P. Morgan Chase revealed they lost some customer information through a third-party provider. I, as a customer of J.P. Morgan Chase, don't even know about this third-party provider that's got my data. So I think this is a much bigger issue. But I think that Sony is doing the appropriate things here. I think they're working with the authorities. They shut down the network. I mean, it's severe, but I don't think by any stretch of the imagination this is going to stop them. They've actually had a pretty good role with the PS3 lately. The games industry has been down, but over the holiday quarter, PS3 software was up 25% year over year. And after 4 years of losses, they're finally making a profit in games. So I don't think this is going to stop that. The much bigger issue for Sony is dealing with the ramifications from the earthquake and the meltdown and tsunami and the impact on their supply chain.
Kind of like a double whammy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great. But I don't think it impacts them as big as people
I'll tell you, I think the bigger issue for Sony beyond this is just being Sony. And when you take a look at Sony, to me, if you go to any shopping center that has a Sony store and an Apple store, that sums up the issue with Sony. The feel, the look, just the concept that these two companies are so different. And then if you take a look at the stock and you go and take a look at the multiples and you take a look, and I like to compare Sony to Microsoft, because what do both of these fading stars have? They both have games that have saved them. If you take a look at them, look at Sony, where you have a multiple that's 3 times the size of Microsoft, yet both of their shares have fallen by about 15% over the past year. And you say to yourself, one's either expensive, one's either cheap. What's the story here?
Yeah,
I'm not sure what numbers you've got, but they're trading about 12 times current year's earnings, and they have about 35% of the market cap in cash. So actually, I think there's kind of an opportunity here.
What are they going to do with the
There's a lot of moving
cash?
parts in Sony, but I think there's an opportunity.
What's going to happen to CEO Howard Stringer, Herb? I mean, there are increasing calls for him to step down, that the communication process has been flawed, a lot of angry people. Can he survive this?
Well, the bigger question is, how's he survived so long? You know, and that, I think, is what people are starting to look at. And I think that right now, I think with his longevity at that company, my guess is, just based on what I've seen.
So who would take over? Kazuo Hirai? Is he the likely successor? Dan, do you have a shot at that?
Yeah, I think that Hirai-san is the most likely successor. He's done a fantastic job with the games division, you know, after he got it back from the prior head of the group, and he merged together that with the network and the electronics division. So I think they're doing the right things, and I think he's very street-friendly. He spent a lot of his time in his career at Sony in the U.S., so his English is fantastic, his Japanese is fantastic. So yeah, I think Hirai-san is probably the likely successor, and I think that Sony's doing a pretty good job of communicating to the street that there is a transition in progress.
They've lost their mojo. They've lost it a long time ago.
Dave, I just want to ask you, as an ethical hacker, is Sony easy to hack into ethically? I mean, are there other competitors?
Or maliciously, for that matter. It seems to be easy to do it maliciously.
Is Sony your easiest hack?
Well, I guess, I mean, your question really here is their competition is Microsoft, which is one of the world's best companies when it comes to security. And right now, I can play games on their network, and I can't on Sony's. So they're clearly easier than the other runner in the game.
Have you ever hacked into Herb Greenberg's operation over here?
Please, no.
As an ethical hacker, so it's okay for you to hack. Have you ever hacked into Herb?
I don't think you should antagonize Dave. I think we should just leave it there and move on.
You've just left him speechless.
Yeah. Gentlemen, fun segment. Thanks so much for joining us.